John Leslie Prescott. Baron Prescott is a British politician who was the Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1997 to 2007. Born in Prestatyn, Wales, he represented Hull East as the Labour Member of Parliament from 1970 to 2010. In the 1994 leadership election, he stood for both leader and deputy leader of the Labour Party, winning election to the latter office. He was appointed Deputy Prime Minister after Labour's victory in the 1997 election, with an expanded brief as Secretary of State for the Environment, Transport and the Regions, a former ship's steward and trade union activist. By the 1990s he was presented as the political link to the working class in a Labour Party increasingly led by modernising, middle-class professionals. In his youth he failed the 11+ entrance examination for grammar school, but went on to graduate from Ruskin College and the University of Hull. Prescott also developed a reputation as a key conciliator in the often tense relationship between Prime Minister Tony Blair and Chancellor of the Exchequer Gordon Brown. On the 27th of June 2007 he resigned as Deputy Prime Minister, coinciding with Blair's resignation as Prime Minister. Following an election within the Labour Party, he was replaced as Deputy Leader by Harriet Harman. Prescott retired as an MP at the 2010 election. On the 8th of July 2010, he entered the House of Lords as a life peer with the title Baron Prescott of Kingston upon Hull in the county of East Yorkshire. Prescott stood as the Labour candidate in the election to be the first Police and Crime Commissioner for Humberside Police, but lost to Conservative Matthew Grove. On the 21st of February 2015, it was announced that Prescott would return to politics as a special advisor to then Labour leader Ed Miliband. Early life: the son of John Herbert Prescott, a railway signalman and Labour councillor, and Phyllis, and the grandson of a miner. Prescott was born in Prestatyn, Wales, on the 31st of May 1938. In 2009, he said, "I've always felt very proud of Wales and being Welsh. I was born in Wales, went to school in Wales and my mother was Welsh. I'm Welsh. It's my place of birth, my country." In 2009, John Prescott featured in the BBC Wales programme Coming Home about his Welsh family history, with roots in Prestatyn and Chirk. He left Wales in 1942 at the age of 4 and was brought up initially in Brinsworth in South Yorkshire, England. He attended Brinsworth Manor School, where in 1949 he sat but failed the 11+ examination to attend Rotherham Grammar School. Shortly afterwards, his family moved to Upton, Cheshire, and he attended Grange Secondary Modern School in nearby Ellesmere Port. He became a steward and waiter in the Merchant Navy, thus avoiding national service, working for Cunard, and was a popular left-wing union activist. Prescott's time in the Merchant Navy included a cruise from England to New Zealand in 1957. Among the passengers was Sir Anthony Eden, recuperating after his resignation over the Suez Crisis. Prescott reportedly described Eden as a real gentleman. Apart from serving Eden, who stayed in his cabin much of the time, Prescott also won several boxing contests, at which Eden presented the prizes. He married Pauline Tilly Tilston at Upton Church in Chester on the 11th of November 1961. He then went to the independent Ruskin College, which specializes in courses for union officials, where he gained a diploma in economics and politics in 1965. In 1968, he obtained a BSc in economics and economic history at the University of Hull. Member of Parliament, he returned to the National Union of Seamen as a full-time official before being elected to the House of Commons as Member of Parliament for Hull East in 1970, succeeding Commander Harry Percy, the retiring Labour MP. The defeated Conservative challenger was Norman Lamont. Previously, he had attempted to become MP for Southport in 1966, but came in second place, approximately 9,500 votes behind the Conservative candidate. From July 1975 to 1979, he concurrently served as a member of the European Parliament and leader of the Labour group, when its members were nominated by the national parliaments. In 1988, Prescott and Eric Heffer challenged Roy Hattersley for the deputy leadership of the party, but Roy Hattersley was re-elected as deputy leader. Prescott stood again in the 1992 deputy leadership election, following Hattersley's retirement, but lost to Margaret Beckett. Prescott held various posts in Labour's shadow cabinet, but his career was secured by an impassioned closing speech in the debate at the Labour Party conference in 1993 on the introduction of one member, one vote for the selection and reselection of Labour parliamentary candidates that helped swing the vote in favour of this reform. In 1994, Prescott was a candidate in the party leadership election that followed the death of John Smith, standing for the positions of both leader and deputy leader. Tony Blair won the leadership contest, with Prescott being elected deputy leader, deputy prime minister, with the formation of a Labour government in 1997. Prescott was made deputy prime minister and given a very large portfolio as the head of the newly created Department for Environment, Transport and the Regions. In the United Kingdom, the title of deputy prime minister is used only occasionally, and confers no constitutional powers. The deputy prime minister stands in when the prime minister is unavailable, most visibly at prime minister's questions, and Prescott had attended various heads of government meetings on behalf of then Prime Minister Tony Blair. Since the position of deputy prime minister draws no salary, Prescott's remuneration was based on his position as Secretary of State for the Environment, Transport and the Regions until 2001. This super-department was then broken up, with the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs and the Department for Transport established as separate entities. Prescott, still Deputy Prime Minister, was also given the largely honorific title of First Secretary of State. In July 2001, an Office of the Deputy Prime Minister was created to administer the areas remaining under his responsibility. This was originally part of the Cabinet Office, but became a department in its own right in May 2002, when it absorbed some of the responsibilities of the former Department for Transport, Local Government and the Regions. The ODPM had responsibility for local and regional government, housing, communities and the fire service. Environment. The UK played a major role in the successful negotiations on the Kyoto Protocol on climate change, and Prescott led the UK delegation at the discussions. In May 2006, in recognition of his work in delivering the Kyoto Treaty, Tony Blair asked Prescott to work with the Foreign Secretary and the Environment Secretary on developing the government's post-Kyoto agenda. Transport. Integrated transport policy. On coming to office, Prescott pursued an integrated public transport policy. On 6 June 1997, he said, "I will have failed if in 5 years' time there are not far fewer journeys by car. It's a tall order, but I urge you to hold me to it." Quote. However, by June 2002, car traffic was up by 7%. This prompted Friends of the Earth's Tony Bosworth to say, by its own test, government transport policy has failed. Prescott had success in focusing attention on the role of car usage in the bigger environmental picture and the need for effective public transport alternatives if car volume is to be reduced. The subsequent debate on road pricing evolved from his policy. A contrast was highlighted between Prescott's transport brief and an incident in 1999, when an official chauffeur-driven car was used to transport Prescott and his wife 250 yards from their hotel to the venue of the Labour Party conference, where Prescott gave a speech on how to encourage the use of public transport. Prescott explained, "Because of the security reasons for one thing, and second, my wife doesn't like to have her hair blown about. Have you got another silly question?" Prescott has been fined for speeding on 4 occasions. Rail regulation. Prescott had a stormy relationship with the privatization of the railway industry. He had vigorously opposed the privatization of the industry while the Labour Party was in opposition, and disliked the party's policy, established in 1996 just before the flotation of Railtrack on the London Stock Exchange, of committing to renationalise the industry only when resources allowed, which he saw as meaning that it would never be done. Reluctantly, he supported the alternative policy, produced by then Shadow Transport Secretary Clare Short, that the industry should be subjected to closer regulation by the to-be-created Strategic Rail Authority and the Rail Regulator. The policy was spelled out in some detail in the Labour Party's statement in the June 1996 prospectus for the sale of Railtrack shares, and was widely regarded as having depressed the price of the shares. In 1998, Prescott was criticised by Transport Minister John Reid for his statement at the Labour Party conference that year that the privatised railway was a national disgrace. Despite receiving a standing ovation from the Labour Party audience, the companies felt that they had had some considerable successes in cutting costs and generating new revenues in the short time since the transfer to private sector hands, and that the criticisms were premature and unfair. In that speech, Prescott also announced that he would be taking a far tougher line with the companies, and to that end he would be having a spring clean of the industry. This meant that the incumbent director of passenger rail franchising, John O'Brien, and the rail regulator John Swift QC, both appointed by the previous Conservative government, would have to make way for new Labour appointees. In July 1998, Prescott published a transport white paper stating that the rail industry needed an element of stability and certainty if it was to plan its activities effectively. In February 1999, the regulation of the passenger rail operators fell to Sir Alistair Morton, who Prescott announced would be appointed as chairman of the Strategic Rail Authority, which would take over from the Director of Passenger Rail Franchising, whose office would be wound up. In July 1999, the new rail regulator appointed by Prescott was Tom Windsor. They shared Prescott's view that the railway industry needed a considerable shake-up in its institutional, operational, engineering and economic matrix to attract and retain private investment and enable the companies within it to become strong, competent and successful. Local and regional government. Responsible for local government, Prescott introduced a new system guiding members' conduct after 2001. The new system included a nationally agreed code of conduct laid down by statutory instrument which all local authorities were required to adopt. The code of conduct gives guidance on when councillors have an interest in a matter under discussion and when that interest is prejudicial, so that the councillor may not speak or vote on the matter, although on many areas councillors had previously been expected to withdraw where they had declared an interest. The new system made the system more formal and introduced specific sanctions for breaches. It was criticized for preventing councillors from representing the views of the local communities. Prescott supported regional government in England. Early in his term, he introduced regional assemblies to oversee the work of new regional development agencies in the regions of England. Following Labour's second election victory, he pressed for the introduction of elected regional assemblies, which would have seen about 25 to 35 members elected under a similar electoral system to that used for the London Assembly. However, because of opposition, the government was forced to hold regional referendums on the change. The first three were intended to be in the North East, North West and Yorkshire and Humberside. The North East referendum in November 2004 was first but resulted in an overwhelming vote of 78% against. As a consequence, the plan for elected regional assemblies was shelved. Housing. A rising number of households were putting added pressure on housing during Prescott's tenure as the minister responsible. An increase in the house building was proposed primarily on brownfield sites, but also on some undeveloped greenfield areas, and as a result he was accused of undermining the Green Belt. During a radio interview in January 1998, Prescott was asked about housing development on the Green Belt, intending to convey that the government would enlarge Green Belt protection. Prescott replied, "It's a Labour achievement, and we mean to build on it." He had not intended to make a joke and was distressed when it prompted laughter. In the north of England, Prescott approved the demolition of some 200,000 homes that were judged to be in failing areas as part of his Pathfinder regeneration scheme. It has been argued that renovating properties, rather than demolishing them, would have made better financial and community sense. Prescott led the campaign to abolish council housing, which ran out of steam when tenants in Birmingham voted to stay with the council in 2002. A previous attempt to privatise all the council housing in the London Borough of Camden failed in 1997. Opposition to education reforms. On the 17th of December 2005, Prescott made public his disapproval of Tony Blair's plans to give state schools the right to govern the finances and admission policies and to increase the number of city academies. It was the first policy stance that Prescott had made against Blair since his election as leader in 1994. Prescott said that the move would create a two-tier educational system that would discriminate against the working class. He added that Labour were always better fighting class links with the grassroots. Prescott, sometimes described as an old-school unionist, kept in touch with the views of the traditional Labour voters throughout his career. He became an important figure in Tony Blair's New Labour movement, as the representative of old Labour interests in the shadow cabinet and subsequently around the cabinet table as Deputy Prime Minister. However, now a member of the establishment, relationships with the grassroots were not always smooth. Whilst attending the Brit Awards in 1998, Chumbawamba vocalist Dan But No Bacon poured a jug of iced water over Prescott, saying, "This is for the Liverpool Dockers." A reporter from the Daily Mirror threw water over No Bacon the following day. Abolition of department. In a cabinet reshuffle on 5 May 2006, Prescott's departmental responsibilities were transferred to Ruth Kelly, as Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, following revelations about his private life and a poor performance by Labour in that year's local elections. He remained as Deputy Prime Minister, with a seat in the cabinet, and was given a role as a special envoy to the Far East as well as additional responsibilities chairing cabinet committees. Despite having lost his departmental responsibilities, it was announced that he would retain his full salary and pension entitlements, along with both his grace and favor homes, an announcement which received considerable criticism. The press speculated in July 2006 that, as a consequence of the continuing problems centered on Prescott, Blair was preparing to replace him as Deputy Prime Minister with David Miliband, whilst possibly retaining Prescott as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, but nothing came of this announcement of retirement. In a speech to the 2006 Labour Party conference in Manchester, Prescott apologised for the bad press he had caused the party during the previous year. He said, "I know in the last year I let myself down. I let you down. Circumference. I just want to say sorry," and confirmed that he would stand down as deputy leader when Blair resigned the premiership. Prescott subsequently announced in the House of Commons that he was in a rather happy demob stage in January 2007, within 30 minutes of Blair announcing the date of his resignation on the 10th of May 2007. Prescott announced his resignation as deputy leader of the Labour Party during the subsequent special Labour Party conference, at which Gordon Brown was elected leader and Harriet Harman succeeded Prescott as deputy leader. Prescott received a prolonged standing ovation from the members present, in recognition of his many years of service to the party. Life after government. Following his resignation, it was announced that he would take over from Tony Lloyd as the lead UK representative in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. The post is unpaid, but has an expenses allowance and allows him to sit on the Assembly of the Western European Union. In a jocular response to the appointment, Shadow Europe Minister Marc Francois wished the translators good luck. On the 27th of August 2007, Prescott stated that he would stand down as an MP at the next general election, after which he was offered a peerage. He has also engaged in the campaign against slave labour, which he intends to make a key issue in his work at the council. Prescott is a director of Super League rugby league club Hull Kingston Rovers, who are based in his former constituency of Hull East. His autobiography, Prestatyn, My Story, Pulling No Punches, ghostwritten by Hunter Davies, was published on the 29th of May 2008. In June 2008, he made a cameo appearance, playing a policeman, in the BBC Radio 4 adaptation of Robert Tressel's The Ragged-Trousered Philanthropists. In 2009, he made a brief cameo appearance as himself in the final episode of the BBC Three comedy series Gavin and Stacey. In October and November 2008, he was the subject of a two-part documentary, Prescott, The Class System and Me, on BBC Two, looking at the class system in Britain, and asking whether it still exists. In October 2009, he was featured in another BBC Two documentary, Prescott, The North-South Divide, where Prescott and his wife Pauline explored the current state of the North-South divide from the perspective as Northern England has long used to, living in the south of the country. During the 2010 election campaign, Prescott toured the UK in a customised white transit van dubbed his Battle Bus, canvassing support for the Labour Party. Prescott was publicly very supportive of Gordon Brown, and has called him a global giant. Prescott has stated in interviews that he is not religious. He chose to make a non-religious solemn affirmation rather than swearing an oath during his introduction in the House of Lords. Beginning on the 7th of January 2011, John Prescott appeared in a TV advert for insurance company Money Supermarket.com, along with comedian Omar Jalili, which gently mocks events in his political career. On the 27th of February 2011, Prescott appeared on the BBC's Top Gear as the star in the reasonably priced car, where he set a lap time of 1.56.7, the second slowest in a Kia CEED. He also engaged in a discussion with host Jeremy Clarkson regarding his time in government, to raise awareness of Red Nose Day 2011, a charity event organized by Comic Relief. Prescott delivered the area forecasts of the 0048 shipping forecast on Saturday, the 19th of March 2011. The format then reverted to the BBC continuity. Announcer Alice Arnold for the reports on coastal areas. On delivering the area forecast for Humber, Prescott slipped deliberately into his distinctive Humberside accent, saying Humber without the H, as we say it up there. On the 6th of July 2013, Prescott revealed in a newspaper column that he had resigned from the Privy Council in protest against the delays to the introduction of press regulation. The resignation only became effective on the 6th of November the same year. The coalition government had insisted that the Privy Council must consider a cross-party royal charter to underpin a new system of regulation, but that this meant that a final decision would not be taken before 2015. Life peerage. It was announced on the 28th of May 2010 that Prescott was to be awarded a life peerage. The peerage was gazetted on the 15th of June in the 2010 dissolution honours. He was introduced in the House of Lords on the 8th of July as Baron Prescott of Kingston upon Hull in the county of East Yorkshire, and the letters patent were gazetted on the 12th of July, dated the 7th of July. Note that the comma appears after Prescott, not Hull, because his title is Baron Prescott, not Baron Prescott of Kingston upon Hull. Iraq War Inquiry. On the 30th of July 2010, Lord Prescott appeared before the panel at the Chilcot inquiry concerning the Iraq War. Prescott stated that he was doubtful about the legality, intelligence and information about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. The inquiry was launched by Gordon Brown in the summer of 2009, shortly after operations in the war ended. In 2016, after publication of the resultant Chilcot report, which was critical of the war but remained neutral on its legality, Prescott declared that the invasion by UK and US forces had been illegal, and that members of Tony Blair's cabinet were given too little paper documentation to make decisions. Police Commissioner. In February 2012, Prescott announced he would stand for Labour's nomination in the election to be the first Police and Crime Commissioner for Humberside Police. In June he was selected as the Labour candidate for the election in November 2012. In the November election, Prescott won the most first preference votes but ended up losing to Conservative Matthew Grove in the second count. Health concerns. Prescott was diagnosed with diabetes in 1990, although this was not publicly disclosed until 2002. On the 2nd of June 2007 he was admitted to hospital after being taken ill on a train from his constituency in Hull to London King's Cross. He was later diagnosed with pneumonia and was treated at University College Hospital, London. He was moved to a high-dependency ward on the 5th of June 2007 so he could be monitored more closely because of his age and the fact he suffers from diabetes. On the 6th of June 2007 it was reported in the media that his condition was stable and that he was sitting up and joking with hospital staff. He was subsequently released from hospital on the 10th of June 2007 to continue his recovery at home. In April 2008, Prescott recounted having suffered from the eating disorder bulimia nervosa, which he believed was brought on by stress, for the 1980s through until 2007.